Hello and welcome back to the Angry Astronaut. So I made a promise that I would release a video in regards to some speculative information about where UFOs might come from, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, where in the universe they may come from, that is. Do we have any potential locations, any potential home systems, home stars that these things could have originated from? Yes, I'm even going to delve into that. And also, what might their objectives be? How did they come here? And do they represent any threat to us? I made a commitment that I would release a video about those types of topics if I hit 4,000 likes, and man, we blew right past that in substantially less than 24 hours. And in the few days that have elapsed since I released that video, this has now become the third most popular video ever released on my channel, closing in on 250,000 views at the time of this recording. It's mind-boggling. First of all, I've added several thousand new subscribers. Thank you so much. Also, welcome to a lot of my new viewers. Clearly, this is a topic that people want me to talk about. I'll be releasing a couple of videos a month about this topic. Certainly not a lot more than that, because the Angry Astronaut is about space flight and space science, not about UFOs. In any event, let's talk a little bit about what's happened with David Grush. And yes, I guess that's the way his last name is pronounced. I looked at John Michael Gaudier's story on it. He pronounced it Grush, so I did as well. But it seems to be Grush in any event. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But a couple of other things have come to light about his claims. First of all, he's said that alien pilots have been recovered in addition to alien craft, although he also admits that he himself did not see any of this stuff, that he's getting all of this information secondhand by his colleagues in the intelligence community, or at least he did when he was investigating UAPs. And that is a very serious consideration, very serious detail that needs to be taken into account when we're talking about the credulity of what this man is claiming. So, in any event, alien pilots in addition to alien ships, and apparently, according to a French media source, he also claimed that there was a alien ship the size of a football field. Now, it's not clear as to whether or not this was something that was recovered or just something that was observed. If we're talking about an alien craft the size of a football field, well, this is something that was actually observed, if indeed it was an alien craft, as part of the whole Phoenix Lights incident. The craft involved in that particular incident were at least the size of football fields. Maybe that's what he's talking about. But regardless of his new claims, it needs to be taken into account, as I said before, that he has no physical proof, no documentation, at least no documentation that he can share with the media. So where do we go from here? Well, Congress apparently is taking this so seriously that they are going to hold a hearing about the matter. This has never happened before. We've had all kinds of claims in the past, people who used to work for the military, used to work for the government, etc., who say that they've seen alien craft, that they were involved in some sort of alien technology research program. That's happened over and over again, and there's never been a hearing in Congress triggered by any of these particular claims. But once again, this is somebody who was very high-ranking in the intelligence community, somebody who reported directly to President Biden on some matters, somebody who needs to be taken seriously, and that is why we are having a congressional hearing. And there's one more detail that we really need to keep in mind. If this man is lying about any of his claims, then he has committed a crime, a very serious crime. And that's something that someone in his position would be very unlikely to do. But when it comes right down to it, these are just claims without tangible evidence. And without tangible evidence, we're never really going to get to the bottom of this unless the government decides to reveal some more information, which I think is highly unlikely. So although this is a very, very credible witness, this is only going to go so far before we're going to hit another governmental dead end. and the wall of deniability will stop all further investigation. But I'll keep you up to date. In the meantime, if UAPs are indeed alien in origin, where are they from? How did they get here? And what are their goals? We're going to find all of that out in just a moment. Our story begins at an F-type main sequence star 1470 light years from Earth called Tabby Star. Those of you who have watched my channel in the past know that I talk a hell of a lot about this star. It is a highly controversial place, so here's what we know about it right now. Most stars, at least if they have a planetary system, will experience some kind of dimming. A dimming caused when a planet passes in front of the star, especially if it's a particularly sizable planet. Smaller planets are much more difficult to detect, but Tabby Star is very different. It dims as much as 28% worth of dimming for its light curve, which is quite substantial, indicating a very big planet to block out that much light. But that's not the case. It's a very uneven dimming, and a dimming that changes with every observation. This has led astronomers to conclude that it's some kind of dust cloud being created by an exomoon or planet breaking apart, and therefore the amount of debris and dust being created causes this uneven amount of dimming. However, this is not an explanation that is held up, because this kind of debris generates a lot of energy in the infrared, and whatever is dimming Tabby Star does not glow in the infrared at all. It could also be a bunch of cold comets. That would be a good explanation, although it would have to be so many comets as to be completely implausible, and this explanation has been largely debunked as well. Now, there are other things about the Tabby Star phenomena that scream artificial origin or technosignature, and if you want to learn more about that, I have a video linked at the end of this one, but many have concluded that what is actually causing the dimming that we're seeing at Tabby Star must be something artificial, an alien megastructure, so to speak. That being the case, though, it can't be a traditional megastructure because it's not blocking out all spectrums of light as a solid object would do. Only certain spectra are being affected. This has led NASA to conclude that whatever is blocking out the star must have the consistency of something like smoke. But what behaves like smoke, or behaves like dust, and yet isn't dust? Well, there is one compelling possibility. It could be a cloud of alien nanomachines artificially absorbing the necessary spectra of light that they require in order to operate. A machine civilization or hive mind comprised of billions or trillions of these tiny nanomachines, all acting as microscopic solar collectors, absorbing sufficient energy in order to keep a gigantic hive mind or artificial intelligence alive, and also to power other aspects of the civilization. Now, this kind of megastructure could generate some next level energy. Let's say it only collected 1% of the sun's energy. That would be 3.34 times 10 to the 24th power watts. Now, before we talk about what a civilization could possibly need such a tremendous amount of power for, let's talk about another topic that makes Tabby Star so very interesting, and I call this the cluster. There is a compacted group of 15 different stars out of over 1 million that were studied, by the way, which share those same uneven dimming characteristics. And interestingly enough, all all of these stars are F or G class main sequence stars, very similar to our own sun, and Tabby Star, as I mentioned before, is an F class main sequence star. I have another video, by the way, linked at the end of this one, which talks more extensively about this cluster, but it seems to be a strong indicator of the existence of an interstellar civilization, because why would all of this unusual dimming occur only at F and G class stars that are very well suited to habitable planets, and why would they also be clustered all in the same area of space out of 1 million stars surveyed? And even more significant, one of these stars lies a little over 400 light years from our sun, putting it a lot closer to our stellar backyard. Now, why would a machine civilization have need for planets that are habitable, planets well suited to organic life, if all they need is a star to provide them with the necessary power? Well, one possibility is it's not a machine civilization, but rather nanomachines that are being used by a biological civilization who are in the process of trying to build an interstellar empire, civilization, whatever you want to call it, and seeking out planets that are well suited to their biology, in which case that means their biology is pretty similar to ours, which would explain why they're interested in our G-class star and our planet. Also, however, an interstellar machine civilization might also have a use for G-class stars and the planets that circle them, and more particularly the life forms that live on them, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. So what we're talking about here is a cluster of G and F-class stars, all of which may be circled by alien megastructures capable of generating tremendous amounts of power, all lying in the same region of space and not that far away from our sun. Still, why would they need so much power? Well, one of the primary reasons is to drive interstellar spacecraft to relativistic speeds. And before I get to the topic of propulsion, I would remind you to please like this video. It will definitely help give it more exposure, and also check the description for various ways to support my content so I can keep this stuff coming. So what we're talking about now is a magnetoplasma drive, and what this is an artificially generated magnetic field, something I talked about briefly in the previous episode. A vessel that can generate its own magnetic field by means of extremely efficient superconductors powered by a small fusion reactor. You can travel as fast as the stellar wind of the star that you happen to be coming from, but you can go at much higher velocities if you have a stream of charged particles hitting your magnetosphere at relativistic speeds. In other words, speeds very close to that of the speed of light. And the best way to provide those is to accelerate these types of projectiles or particles from your star of origin by means of some sort of particle accelerator or some other method of generating an artificial solar wind that's traveling at thousands of kilometers per second instead of hundreds of kilometers per second. This system would not only allow a spacecraft to accelerate to a substantial percentage of the speed of light, the same magnetosphere would gradually slow a ship down as it approached its destination star, which means you could get your ship out to its destination very quickly and then arrive at a much more controllable speed, utilizing the same type of propulsion method. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, the same principle could be used to maneuver around in the atmosphere of our own planet or in the solar system by manipulating the magnetic fields of the sun and the various planets in our solar system. So the same principle could power a ship in terms of getting here, in terms of maneuvering here, in terms of slowing down. It's a pretty elegant solution that seems to be demonstrated right in front of our noses right now by whatever's visiting us, assuming, of course, all of this is of alien origin, and I'm not saying that's 100% the case. So, that being the case, in order to accelerate a ship to these vast velocities, the star of origin would have to generate an enormous amount of power. It takes a huge amount of energy to drive projectiles to relativistic speeds, especially enough projectiles to accelerate a fairly large ship up to relativistic speeds. Therefore, that's one of many reasons why you would need an alien megastructure. Whew! Okay, so we've covered where these ships might have come from, the civilization that produced them, and the type of technology that they might have at their disposal. But of course, one of the most obvious questions that comes to mind, especially if I'm talking about a civilization that's hundreds of light years away from Earth, is why the hell would they want to come here? Why would they select our planet? Even if they had extremely good optics, capable of picking out our planet as being a habitable planet orbiting a G-class star, why would they choose to come here given the fact that 400, 500 years ago, or especially 1500 years ago, there was no evidence of an advanced civilization on our planet whatsoever, and therefore nothing to study? Well, I'd like to propose that whoever is visiting us right now never was interested in our civilization in the first place. They are instead interested in our star, and in any habitable world orbiting a G-class star, regardless of whether there's a civilization there or not. And the most compelling piece of evidence that we have, in my opinion, to indicate that extraterrestrial visitors might have no interest in our civilization at all is the only interstellar spacecraft that we have ever observed, the mysterious Muamua, assuming that that was an interstellar spacecraft in the first place, but I am fairly convinced that it was. And I'm not going to go into all the details of Muamua as to what made it artificial. I have a video about that linked at the end of this one as well. But here are a few characteristics of Muamua that make it especially interesting. Number one, before it encountered our star system, it was traveling at a speed that corresponded to what's called the GSR, or Galactic Standard of Rest. What does that mean? Well, it means that it was a stationary location relative to all the stars orbiting the center of the Milky Way. Why would that be important? Well, interstellar navigation is extremely difficult unless you have stationary reference points. Therefore, if Muamua was traveling at this speed, it would have been incredibly useful as a navigational buoy, and that might have been its primary purpose. So, let's say that this interstellar civilization that's a few hundred light years away decided to place a number of navigational buoys around the galaxy in order to make interstellar travel a little bit easier. They then program these navigational buoys with a secondary purpose, and that is if they encounter any G-class stars during the course of their operations, they set a course that will allow them to pass through the solar system in question fairly close to any habitable planets that might exist in the star's Goldilocks zone, which is exactly what Muamua did, passing less than 0.2 astronomical units away from Earth. Still a substantial distance, but close enough for Muamua to dispatch a few spherical probe ships. Muamua then, utilizing either some sort of solar sail or its electromagnetic drive, starts to move its way out of the solar system to go back on station and reassume its original speed at the Galactic Standard of Rest. And by the way, we did observe Muamua doing exactly this, accelerating out of the solar system significantly faster than gravity alone would account for. So there are many other things, by the way, about Muamua that make it seem very artificial, but Muamua had a primary purpose that had nothing to do with exploring Earth, but had a secondary purpose which led it to send a few probes down to our planet, which is what we're observing right now. And there are probably other ships that have passed by our planet in the past that have done exactly the same thing, which is why we have observed so many of these craft over the past several decades. It's also very interesting to note that one of the 2 interstellar meteors that we have detected, at least the ones that have impacted our atmosphere, arrived here at roughly the same time that we detected a Muamua, and it was traveling at a similar speed and trajectory. It could very well have come from a Muamua. Very strange coincidence indeed, and given the fact that both of the interstellar meteors that hit our planet were apparently comprised out of a metal much tougher than any of the nickel-iron meteors that we have detected that came from within our solar system, that suggests that they may not have been meteors at all. But what is their objective? Let's get to that last point. What might an interstellar civilization really want with our solar system and our planet? Well, it might just be for research purposes. It might be a standard operating procedure for any interstellar spacecraft, especially an automated buoy to simply dispatch probe ships to any inhabited planet or any planet that's suitable for habitation in order to determine if there's anything there. But there might be other objectives as well, and that can be found in the writings of a certain Dr. John van Neumann. Dr. van Neumann imagined something called a Van Neumann probe, the ultimate in interstellar colonization. What does it do? Well, it contains the blueprints for a civilization all imprinted on its own operative systems. That is to say, it's capable of producing infinite duplicates of itself and also infinite duplicates of anything it's programmed to produce. In the case of these orb-like UFOs that we're seeing right now, it's possible that they might contain the blueprints for other types of devices. For example, the various types of technology that an alien species might use in the process of colonizing another planet, together with the DNA blueprints of the aliens that sent it in the first place. This is assuming, of course, that we're not dealing with an exclusively machine civilization, but rather an organic civilization utilizing Van Neumann probes and nanomachines for their own benefit. What might they want to achieve? Well, if these nanomachines could gather enough organic material, they could start producing clones of the creatures that sent it in the first place. As I said, this is the ultimate in interstellar colonization. You don't have to send ships capable of carrying organic creatures over interstellar distances that could take centuries or millennia to arrive at their destination, but rather have these Van Neumann probes produce clones of the creatures that sent it in the first place. This would also explain why we are seeing aliens in addition to the craft that came with them. Not to say that these aliens traveled between the stars, but rather that these Van Neumann probes are producing these clones of the aliens that built them in the first place. All of that a little frightening, but it would explain why they are interested in our planet and also why they have been examining our military equipment in such great detail. They might want to determine just how dangerous we might be and also how aggressively we might respond if they were to reveal themselves. So, all of that being considered, it could be that these ships are Van Neumann probes with a long-term objective of duplicating themselves and also producing replicas of the creatures that built them in order to colonize our planet, or at least to make contact. But, believe it or not, there's an even more frightening possibility. If we are dealing instead with a machine civilization, perhaps made up of these smoke particles, these nanomachines that we have observed possibly orbiting a variety of different stars, the reason they're interested in our planet is because they want to make use of organic life forms, either as slave labor or perhaps with some of the original ideas and technology that we might come up with. Before I make them sound too much like the Borg, I don't think that they intend to absorb us or make us part of their colony or break us down with nanomachines, etc., but instead simply to exploit the products of organic life forms. We are, after all, thinking creatures ourselves and also capable of self-repair and self-replication, making us a very useful slave species, and this would also also explain why they're interested in our military technology to determine our capability to resist. If this is the case, it is a terrifying scenario indeed, because a cloud of nanomachines like the smoke, something capable of obscuring sunlight, could shade the sun and plunge our planet into an artificial ice age if they wanted to. They could wipe out every living thing on the surface of the planet without firing a single death ray or laser beam, simply blot out the sun. And if they had the capability to do that, it would be simple indeed for them to force our surrender. Now, I don't want to make everybody paranoid right now. I find this to be a highly unlikely possibility. If we were being visited by a malevolent machine civilization, I think they would have made their move long before now, because there would have been nothing we could do to stop them. I think it's far more likely that we are either being studied by very simple robot probes, or if they are Van Neumann machines, their objective is to eventually colonize our planet, or at least produce a few clones of the species that built them in order to make contact. Friendly contact. And before they risk doing something like that, they want to learn a lot more about us, and thus far, I wouldn't be surprised if they are very hesitant to make any kind of contact at all, given how aggressive our species tends to be towards each other. If our religions are different, if our political philosophies are different, we kill each other. Can you imagine how we would respond to another species that looks very different from us? So there you have it, where they might be from, how they might get here, what types of ships might be bringing these probes here, and who might have built them. All of this, of course, totally speculative. This is all science fiction, but it is at least based on a fair amount of fact. Astronomical fact, together with what we've observed of these ships thus far, if indeed they are alien in origin. Now, I know there's going to be a fair number of viewers who are going to say that all of this is completely full of crap and I am totally manipulating and exaggerating things. There are no interstellar civilizations that we have observed. Tabby Star is probably a completely natural phenomena. A Muamua was probably a natural object, and Van Neumann probes? Give me a break. But I assure you, there's a fair amount of astronomical information, quite a lot of data that we have collected to prove what I say, or at least to indicate that this thesis may indeed be possible. And all of this is linked at the end of this video. So please smash that like, hit that subscribe, please check the description for ways to support this content, and as always, stay angry about space.